On this episode of Artifactuality, how people and stories from around the world become part of Canada's history and identity. My name is Kim Thuy. On this podcast from the Canadian Museum of History, together we'll explore what objects and stories from the past can tell us about who we are today. What will resonate tomorrow? How will the events unfolding around us be remembered in the future? On September 13, 2022, a young Kurdish woman was visiting Tehran with her family. As she exited a metro station in the Iranian capital, the 22-year-old was stopped by the so-called morality police, a branch of law enforcement that persecutes women who don't dress according to strict modesty laws. The police didn't explain why she was detained, only that it was related to the requirement for women to wear the hijab. Within hours, she was hospitalized. 3 days later, she was dead. Her name was Mahsa Jina Amini. Jina's death sparked global protest against Iran's theocratic regime. The country's security forces said she died from a heart attack. But a UN fact-finding mission held the Iranian government responsible for her death. The report concluded Jina died as a result of physical violence while in police custody. Saïdeh Niktab Etati was living in Canada when she heard about what happened to Jina. Saïdeh is the curator of diasporas and transnational communities at the Canadian Museum of History. She lived in Iran for 27 years and witnessed interactions with the morality police. Saïdeh says watching this kind of tragedy unfold in your homeland is a struggle for people who have moved away.
To be honest, living in diaspora, as many immigrants can testify to that, is a very different experience. You live in a split. You're here, but you're thinking of there. So you have to navigate and respond to two different worlds. I was living in Canada, but my heart, my thoughts, my everything was with Iran and everything was going on in Iran. And most often for the first generation of immigrants, including myself, with strong emotional and familial ties to Iran, anything that happens oceans away from Canada has direct impact on your everyday lives and on how you make your day, how you function on a daily basis. So to me, when that happened, I thought, okay, like any other things that is happening to Iran, it is just related to me as an Iranian. It is just an Iranian issue. It is about Iranian diaspora.
Did your past come back to mind? Did you feel that, all the years living the same kind of constraints or, living in Iran came back to your mind?
Yeah, it definitely did. It was interesting because it triggered many experiences, my own interactions with the police, all the things that I experienced as an Iranian woman there. And even now, when I'm saying this, I feel the change in my body because your body remembers and the memories are with it. I was remembering all those years that I was forced to act in a certain way. I was forced to cover my body in a certain way, and I wasn't pleased with it. But I became much more conscious and cautious about it when I immigrated, and I realized, okay, now I can dress in a way that I want. I don't have to think about morality police. I can just be me.
Woman life freedom! Woman life freedom! Woman life freedom! Woman life freedom! Woman life.
The death of Mahsa Jina Amini sparked the most widespread revolt led by women since the 1979 revolution. It became known as the Women, Life, Freedom movement after a popular Kurdish rallying cry. Protests in solidarity with the growing uprising erupted around the world, including several cities in Canada.
It was very heartwarming. It was a unique experience to me as an Iranian woman, to be honest, living in Canada, because this movement, Iranian women's uprising, it wasn't just Iranian anymore. It turned into a transnational feminist phenomenon and it got international momentum. So when I saw that Iranian diasporas in Canada, they were united, mobilized for this cause, coming to streets, it was fascinating for me to see. And the other important thing was when I went to these rallies, I felt fully supported. I didn't feel I'm alone in this experience, in this grief. It did help me. One of the most powerful moments for me when I was participating and going to these rallies and protests was when the crowd chanted, say her name, Mahsa Jina Amini. That stood out to me. Until this moment I'm talking to you, it was very, very powerful because the tenet of oppression is when an injustice happens to someone, there is no consequence to the oppressor. And I experienced that. But this time, the whole nation rises and they were united, they were mobilized despite of their differences in their whole ethnic and social diversity, and injustice to one life lost ultimately turned into injustice to all.
It became something bigger than women, life, freedom. It became a movement focused on justice for anyone who's been oppressed, including the queer community.
Exactly. And the thing is, it became a human rights issue. It was across gender, across minorities, it was across different groups. What was very interesting was to see non-Iranians who didn't speak Farsi joined and participated in those rallies. In one of the rallies, actually in St. John's, Newfoundland, it coincided with the Pride Parade, and the proximity of these two rallies in St. John's led to merging of these two. So these rallies joined forces. So it became much more bigger. One of the most interesting aspects of it was the intersectional aspect of it. So yes, the slogan says woman, life, freedom, but the woman includes all women identifying bodies, all marginalized bodies, all oppressed bodies. So it isn't just about women, it's about all queer, non-binary people. And the queer life freedom is another very powerful slogan in this movement. So when I saw that happened in Canada, the Pride Parade and the Women Life Freedom movement, to me, it was a very great manifestation of the intersectional nature of this movement. And again, it happened in Canada, not in Iran. So to me, as an Iranian woman, it adds another dimension, how important it was and how transnational, uniting, far-reaching this movement became.
Part of Saïdi's job at the museum is to work with diaspora communities in Canada and help document their stories by collecting artifacts and oral histories. When Saïdi attended the rallies, she collected audio and video recordings as well as placards from protesters. Saïdi's friend, Safoni Neshaburi, offered to collect signs from the demonstrations she attended in Alberta. Safoni teaches in the Gender and Sexuality Studies program, as well as the Muslim Cultures Department at the University of Calgary. She moved to Canada from Tehran 14 years ago.
It was heartwarming to see Iranians of very different political convictions showing up to the rallies here in Calgary with their placards, with their banners, with different flags. I felt a lot of pride and a lot of hope, specifically seeing the rainbow flag and seeing, for instance, the ethnic flags of such as Kurdistan, to see that various minorities are taking active part in this, not just because of a sense of togetherness, of like various peoples and people of various political convictions coming together. The fact that this solidarity exists with all the marginalized voice also present was very heartwarming. I was very proud.
One placard that stood out for Safone features a black and white print of Gina's face. Next to her, there's a drawing of a dagger. It has a handle shaped like a soldier with a gun pointing directly at Gina. Next to the dagger, there's a drawing of a torso with no head. It's topped with what looks like a sickle, a curved blade used for farming. There's red paint dripping across Gina's face. But instead of dripping down to the ground, it drips sideways towards the weapons.
The significance of sickle is that it reminded me of another young woman, Romina, who was, I think it was a year before the Women Life Freedom Movement, that this young woman wanted to marry a person she fell in love with, and her father beheaded her with a sickle. And there was a lot of conversation around this because it's not like this was some sort of common practice. But in interviews with the father, they found out that it wasn't like even a moment of anger. He had gone and he had talked to a lawyer, and the lawyer ensured him that if he kills his daughter, he was not gonna, be in prison. He may be held for a few months and then let go because it was his daughter and he legally, technically owned her. So it's kind of like patriarchy absolutely supported and encouraged to do violent acts on women's bodies by the state. And I kind of see that like the figure with the sickle head as perhaps the ultimate patriarchal figure in Iran, which is the supreme leader, and how these soldiers are, with his support, shooting at women, and then there's a red line. And the way that red line crosses the poster, which is like Gina's blood, or the blood of these people who are fighting for freedom in general, is that it has not dropped on the ground, but it's coming back at the man with the soldier and the man with the sickle head, and kind of like crossing their faces and their necks.
So when you approached people and asked if you could keep their placards, how did they react?
They were fascinated and they really wanted to take part in it. I think it was one of the things that was interesting for me, both with protesters in Iran and the people who were rallying in support in Calgary, was how obsessed and focused they were on recording things. They really wanted this to be recorded. They want this to exist, that they, for instance, for Iranians outside, was like that they supported, that they showed up, that they would do what they can to support the people in Iran in their fight for freedom. And I saw that like with the little clips and videos that came out of Iran, people running away from, the forces, what do they call them, anti-uprising, and they don't call it uprising, they have a negative word for that, like these suppressive forces, and then they were running and filming. One is screaming to the other one with the camera, "What is the date? Where are we?" And then the person says, "The date is da 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 da, and we are in this square in Tehran." Like, they make sure everything is recorded, and they want there to be evidence, categorized, classified, a record of what they're doing.
How meaningful is it that the Canadian Museum of History wants to preserve the placards from these rallies in support of the 2022 uprising?
It's meaningful in different ways. First of all, as Iranian Canadians, to have the histories of what we did and the things that happened within our community preserved in Canadian History Museum is an acknowledgement to our inclusion in Canadian history, and as Canadians, as people contributing to Canadian society and culture. But on another level, it's also very important for academic research in the future, for investigating the histories of this time, We are in a very special couple of decades in the history of the SWANA region, Southwest Asia, North Africa region. But we are very involved in it right now with everything that's happening in that region, including, of course, Iran. In a few decades, we might want to study these, and we need all these resources to understand the connection of all the liberation movements, of all the feminist movements, and the connection between the feminist movements, the environmental movements, the labor movements that are happening in our region, and their connection to the global north, to what's happening outside. So it's very meaningful, and I'm very, very grateful that this is happening, both as an Iranian and as a Canadian academic.
Saeedi Niktab Etati says collecting artifacts from diaspora communities is important because Canada is a multicultural country that's home to millions of immigrants.
There isn't a singular notion for Canadian history. It's not just one narrative. It encompasses many, multiple stories. People like me, people with hyphenated identities, with multiple identities, they are part of this. So this is very important to me to challenge that singular notion that Canadian history is one thing and it should include certain people. No, it is very diverse because Canada is a multicultural country, and all these histories, they are part of this multicultural fabric and they should be included. So my part is to document and show that these are also worthy of collecting because they are making this history and they are part of this national history. These events, these political, social, emotional upheavals may have happened thousands kilometers away from Canada, oceans away from Canada. But the fact is, they have direct impact on the lives of Iranian Canadians. Like many other things that is happening around the world right now, it is happening somewhere else. But the impact is direct on people's everyday lives, how they navigate, how they live their everyday lives because of the things that is happening beyond the borders of Canada. It's been 2 years almost since the inception of the Women Life Freedom movement in Iran. And I can say for sure its long-living legacy persists in different forms. Maybe right now, not in form of street protests, people coming and shouting and protesting visibly on the streets, but for sure in a different form, in quiet acts of resistance that I see in Iran, women defying the compulsory hijab law, and in other ways, how they express their resistance and defiance in a quiet way, not in the form of protests, but how they are not obeying to the laws and how they are expressing their anger, their rage, and also their grief because of all the killing that happened since the murder of Mahsa Jina Amini.
So how optimistic are you about the future of social change in Iran?
I am very optimistic. I mean, how can I not be optimistic about this when I witness Iranian women, despite all this oppression, despite all the crackdowns, all the things that is happening, this form of, different forms of oppression, they continue, they resist, and they voice their discontent. So I am optimistic because they are continuing. And without optimism, no social change would happen.
I know that in the long run, I know that these movements will hopefully connect and bring liberation for all of us, because these things don't happen in isolation. And that also makes it important, the connection to Canada, because it affects us. All of this affects us in Canada as well, as we can see it now with whatever is happening in the world. And it makes us contemplate as to what our role is as citizens of a democracy, to preserve our own democracy as people who have choices. How do our choices and what we do affect other countries in freedom and in their efforts to become democratic?
Safony Neshabouri is an assistant professor in the Gender and Sexuality Studies program with a joint appointment in the Arabic Language and Muslim Cultures Department at the University of Calgary. Safony is currently developing a new academic course about the Women Life Freedom Movement. She hopes the course materials will also reach individual learners in both Iran and Afghanistan through accessible platforms. Thanks to Safony for speaking with me, and thanks also to Saidi Niktab Etati, the curator of diasporas and transnational communities at the Canadian Museum of History. You've been listening to Artifactuality, a podcast from the Canadian Museum of History. I'm Kim Thuy. Artifactuality is produced by Antica Productions. Anne Lang is our producer. Subin Kim is the researcher. Laura Roger and Stuart Cox are executive producers at Antica. Jenny Ellison, Robin Jeffrey, and Steve McCullough of the Canadian Museum of History are the executive producers of this podcast. Check out historymuseum.ca for more stories, articles, and exhibitions from the museum. For more information about the artifacts connected to the Women Life Freedom demonstrations in Canada, check out the links in our show notes.